Shall I kick us off? I think we're struggling to hear you, Renee. Okay. I'll get us going then. While we're just sorting out some technical issues. So welcome everyone. For the feedback. This is our session all about our approach to community engagement, and it will explain both how community organising works and community engagement, and the approach that our team has taken to kind of connect with residents and a core part of what we do. So thank you so much for joining. My name's Isabel and I'm the Gants Hill Community Hub lead, and the team that have been instrumental in making this happen are Dewara, Ronnie, and Tasneem, and Ed. Cool, should we get cracking then? Do you want to go ahead?
Okay, so today's learning session is dedicated to our former colleague Imogen. She sadly passed away last month. Imogen was the Seven Kings Hub lead, and she was with us until October 2021, I believe, before she went on maternity leave. Imogen shaped a lot of our initial engagement strategy work and community engagement and organising, and a lot of that work is still stuff that we use today, and Dewara will tell you a bit about that.
It has been a pleasure and privilege to have known and worked with Imogen. She brought so much positivity to all our lives, and to me personally, she taught me how to listen. She never walked silently, whether it was the youth running out of school or the mums at the park. She spoke to all of them. Have you heard about the hubs? She was just so excited about the work that we were doing and the approach that we had taken. That's how initial engagement on the ground began. She brought her whole self to any kind of engagement activity. During her pregnancy, we went out to meet organisations, making sure there were toilets nearby, and we carried a bag full of snacks so she had something to nibble on if any of her cravings took over. This highlighted the importance and vulnerability of engagement staff when we go out on the ground. To actively listen, you need to be comfortable and present yourself. Imogen was very passionate about story sharing, so she embedded in our initial engagement strategy the art of storytelling, which was through the story of me, the story of you, and the story of us. We use this so much through our community organising in all the hub localities that we've been working on. Through our story sharing approach, we were fortunate to reach the voices of the seldom heard. Next slide, please. So what is our approach? There are many staff in LBR who carry out brilliant engagement activities. Each of them has a unique way of connecting their particular service to local people. We hope to develop and further build on the relationship between residents and the council. We do this through achieving two key objectives. And with these two key objectives, we focus on working with local people in each area to develop a community vision for civic action, participation, opportunity, and growth. Our approach is informed and influenced by the values and practices of community organising, with a particular emphasis on these key principles. These values and practices are reflected in the methods and tools we use. We develop and refine at each stage of our engagement with residents, colleagues, and other partners. The community organising framework provides an overview of the key principles and stages of organising process we take into consideration during all our engagement processes. All of our research was developed into each of these elements, which enable us to carry out engagement with confidence. This is especially important when you work in an area different to your own. Understanding customs, cultures, and norms of a specific area are pivotal in carrying out positive engagement. In community organising, we encourage leadership and build power through action. This doesn't always result in immediate action, but definitely it gets us a reaction. whether or not, even if it's not straight away in the coming months, and now 2.5 years on, we still see the outcome of community organising we carried out at the beginning of our approach.
Yeah, so how do we go about it? What's the kind of nitty gritty? So firstly, we maintain and strengthen conversations that we're already having, and where there's an existing relationship, it's really important that those don't just get dropped, and that we continue that, always having a continuous conversation. This is really important so that people don't have to repeat their story over and over again, and that it feels like it's a genuine relationship that builds on both sides. And what's really important to that is understanding how we as LBR are perceived, and the fact that we need to have this continuous growth and building of these relationships in order for most effective kind of change and meaningful engagement to happen. So once we're maintaining and strengthening those conversations with existing people, the second element is mapping, sense making, and refining. So we do a lot of work with our wonderful data wizard Aga to make sure that we're capturing who are we speaking to thematically, what are we speaking to them about, what are they telling us, what are the insights that are emerging from speaking to these people, and also the data to tell you who are you reaching, who are you not reaching, where are the gaps, and how do we reach those people. And that might be a specific community, it might be a certain age group, it might be people with a certain interest. And what's really important is that we invite scrutiny, and that we're kind of unfazed by the challenge of reaching new and different people who might not agree with the work you're doing, but it's really important in order to make sure that you're representatively hearing the voices of Redbridge, and that you understand who you are reaching in a strategic way. And then the third element is once you've built those conversations with existing people, you've mapped who you're talking to about what, and you've identified those gaps. Obviously, the next thing to do is to invite people in. And what we found is really important is to explain the context and the story, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, the story so far. You're bringing people on the journey with us. It's very easy to assume when you talk about a community hub or to talk about whatever it is that's going on, people understand what it is that you're talking about, where that's come from, because it's your bread and butter, it's your day to day. But it's really, really important to start from the beginning and make sure people understand who you are, why you're coming to them, and where that conversation fits in the broader scheme of things. And it's really important to check for understanding, as I said, because it's our day-to-day jobs. It's really easy to talk in LBR speak and LBR isms, and so we find it really important to make sure that we're being really, really accessible and meeting residents where they're at, speaking in language that feels accessible and just makes sense to people. And if it doesn't, adapting if necessary. So those are kind of three core components: maintain and strengthen those conversations where you already have that connection with residents and organisations. Map, understand what that picture is telling you and where there are gaps to refine, and then invite new people in, are kind of some of the building blocks of our engagement approach.
Thanks, Isabel. We're now going to be showing you a short film summarising our work with Redbridge residents in each of the hub areas, so that's Seven Kings, Gants Hill and Hainault, to understand their hopes and aspirations for their communities and how we help them to get there.
Why we like to listen to our residents, because we want to help identify the common issues that may be happening in the localities. What is our listening campaign? 6 community organisers in 3 different localities, being Gants Hill, Seven Kings and Hainault. We listen to bring together the stories and experiences of our residents that goes to our engagement logs, and then that gives us a broader understanding of the needs of all the areas and what the residents want and need and what we as a council can do for our residents. That helps us to map out the area. We're able to have better stakeholder engagements, building them relationships and engaging more with the communities.
So how does it help strengthen the communities we work in? By having a simple, honest, human conversation, we're encouraging communities to talk about issues that are important to them. We don't have a specific criteria or topic people have to adhere to. Our effort is focused to build further community togetherness and to identify concerns and priorities in a specific place. Seeing familiar faces really helps humanise the council and makes residents much more likely to want to work with us. It's also encouraged people to start up resident-led campaigns, community gatherings, women's networks and connections between existing organisations.
How would you describe the Community Hubs team's approach to community organising and engagement?
Well, it's been really brilliant for us here at Redbridge Institute because we've been able to hear the community's voice quite clearly. So there was a Future Visions workshop here at the Institute back in October, and one of the big themes that were coming out was women's safety and community safety. So listening to what the residents were telling us, what we were able to do is to put on some self-defence workshops, and now we're running self-defence courses.
One of the kind of key aims of community engagement is changing the relationship between residents and the council. Just wondering whether you've seen any of these changes. How is our approach different?
But it was really
The way that the neighbourhoods have been engaged, each neighbourhood has very different needs, and being able to understand those needs really helps to connect with the residents. It's getting that insight that we can't get from anywhere else. I have one community engagement person who works all across the borough. So having a team on the ground, talking to the residents and feeding back their thoughts is really what we need. Just to say thank you very much to the Community Hubs team.
What have the outcomes of it been? Generating insight for community organisers and the Hubs programme team to target further engagement and effectively support community-led events and initiatives. Sharing our learning with other council colleagues, partners and local people to inform and influence their work. Over 3,000 local people have been listened to across 3 hub localities with improved access to council services and knowledge of the purpose of the council. We ensure the voices of those seldom heard can influence decision makers around processes that affect their lives.
What does community engagement mean to you?
It's all about hearing the views of our residents so we can provide the services that they need.
Connecting with people, building relationships, renewing those relationships, understanding one another.
Knowing different side of the council and community as well, meeting you guys.
Involving residents in decision-making process and getting them involved to participate and make an impact and change our perspective. We want to listen to what it is that they need, what it is that they want.
It's about connection and about a shared understanding of what a place means to you as an individual and as a member of the community.
Being able to go out there and talk to residents and understand what the needs are, and then being able to gather all of that and make and plan and action it.
Deep listening, building relationships over time. You're encouraging a conversation which can build and grow.
True engagement for me would be about building a relationship, an ongoing relationship.
Understanding different perspective of what we're doing and what we're gonna keep doing maybe in the future as well.
Okay, so we hope you enjoyed our little film about community engagement, and as soon as we get the presentation back up, we'll be continuing. So what have the outcomes been? As you can see from these two wonderful diagrams, these are just a few of our highlights. So we've engaged around 35 residents for our co-design, working with architects, and over 35 local organisations, including charities, businesses, faith groups, schools and churches.
In Hainault, in the hub in Hainault, we've had the Belonging Project, we've had school engagement, stakeholder engagement, co-design, and the listening campaign, and Hainault cost of living pilot. And through all of the listenings that we've been doing in Hainault, we've been able to get a better understanding of the needs for the residents in the area. So that was then we've been able to put on the cost of living pilot, understanding the place and the needs that's at the time. And with our stakeholder engagement, we've got really good engagement with schools. So when it comes to putting the information out there, we're able to connect with the stakeholders that we have so they can go on to share it to the parents. And we've got, when it comes to the Belonging Project, that was just a project that we put on for our local residents so that the community can feel and have a feel of the place and understand place, and they can give us the information and how they feel part of the area. And that was something that we did back in the summer.
Yep, so really broad range of community engagement that's happened in Gants Hill over the last 2 years, just a little flavour of it here. So you can see the children participating in the anti-litter campaign. There's a fantastic bread making workshop where residents, we supported residents to learn how to make roti and bagel. And as Will Pickford mentioned in the video, the self-defence classes that were a resident-led initiative, and a really nice kind of example of how through community engagement you can bring together, you know, a partner like Redbridge Institute, a resident with the desire to start self-defence and responding to kind of resident needs. And as well as this, there's some examples there from our 4 work streams, which were around improving things for young people in Gants Hill, improving women's safety and community safety, transforming Gants Hill town centre, and bringing neighbours, bringing people together. So those are some of the things that we've been working on, just to give you a flavour of what's been going on in Gants Hill.
And we're on to Seven Kings. So Seven Kings from 2019. We started off with some workshops, and then we went on to a co-design workshops, which a lot of people would have seen online, and you can access it on our webpage as well. And then from that, there was a gap around the youth element. So we designed we carried out a co-design group with young people, and we've had dedicated space in the community hub building for young people. And as I mentioned earlier on, Imogen designed a listening campaign, which 2.5 years later, we still continue with this ongoing listening campaign, because it's been pivotal in bringing back to LBR and Community Hub the thoughts and the emotions of local people and the impact of all these high-rise buildings that are going up, and again, seldom heard voices. Without the community organising approach, we would not be able to reach these people. We also had a community gathering, which was a result of our listening campaign, which was designed by Imogen, but it was local people. We've got some of the pictures on here. They were at the forefront of this community gathering. It was based on themes that we heard from our listenings, and they designed it, they developed it, and one of the outcomes of the first community gathering was the desire to have another community gathering, which, as you can see, it was community gathering continuing the conversation. But the only difference was they didn't want just residents present at that event. They wanted the council also to be a part of that solution making process. One of the comments that were made is that you're always expecting us to do the work, but where are the council members of staff who are here actually listening alongside the community organisers and developing some of those solutions? So the community gathering number 2, we had a lot of that happening there, and we received some positive feedback with, again, another desire to have another community gathering with more staff and more local people involved in developing a solution focused result, so that it's not just the council offering solutions, it's also local people who are saying, look, this is our problem, we can help you tackle some of this, work with us. We also carried out a consultation related to the community hub, where we had the children's centre and the library working closely with us, and they were very supportive throughout the entire consultation. We've started many community projects which are resident led, and due to our community engagement approach, we've been nominated as finalists for the MJ Award, which we're really hoping we're going to win this year.
So hopefully you've been really inspired by our community engagement approach and you want to learn more. Maybe your teams work across Seven Kings or Gants Hill. So if you are interested, we have developed these community visions which bring together insight from over 2,000 residents and over 2 years worth of engagement. There's data in there, there's qualitative data, there's quantitative data, and it really articulates what are people's priorities for the area, what matters to people, and this is a summary of all of those different voices. So if you're interested in receiving either of these, coming soon to a LBR near you, if you'd like to leave your email address in the meeting chat, and we will capture all of those and we'll make sure that we send you a copy of whichever vision or both that you're interested in when they're complete. Hi there. And that's the end of our presentation. So now we'd just like to open up the floor for any questions about our approach, how we go about it, anything about our methodologies. Yeah, if anyone has any questions or thoughts. Go for it, Mark.
Hiya, brilliant presentation as always. The question I've got is about, are there any groups or individuals who you found particularly challenging to engage with, and how have we learned from that, and how we can do better in future as a council? What learning can you share with us about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mark. I'm just wondering if any of the community organisers want to share any examples of communities that have been more challenging to connect with.
I'm happy to answer that one, Isabel. Thank you, Mark, for your question. It has been very, very difficult with the approach that we've taken to meet not just difficult groups, as you've just mentioned, just any person, because when we first went to carry out an engagement, it was, you're from the council, I know what you're after. That's the kind of language we had to pick up. And as you can imagine, we're from the Community Hubs team, so a lot of it is about building. So they didn't want to hear from us at all. You're the ones that are putting up that building, a high-rise buildings, and it's giving us trauma. So much of that language. But as I've mentioned before, it was just through active listening. It's not, we're here to fulfill a survey, we're carrying out some engagement responsibilities that we need to do. It wasn't any of that. It was active listening. And it wasn't, a lot of the comments we used to get at the beginning, are you just here? Is this a tick box exercise that you're out here to fulfill? But being present throughout that engagement and throughout listening and renewing that relationship, that's one of the things that I feel that all 6 community organisers have done very well. It wasn't just that one-off meeting, it was sowing the seeds. It's, we're here, so understanding what that environment. So when I mentioned a bit about understanding place, it was a lot of stakeholder management. It was understanding the internal and external stakeholders and what are the issues. one of the areas that were very dear to me is I found that in the Seven Kings Hub locality, there was a lot of families who were very isolated within their own homes, and there was no way they were going to access any of the services because it was either the husband or the father or the brother that were doing the council services. When we did our listening campaign, we found out a huge amount of skill and resources within those homes. So it was the housewives that were carrying out all the leadership and empowering activities in those communities. So when it came to our first community gathering and we were looking at issues around women and violence, what we heard in those homes was very difficult with us because we wanted to connect them with other teams within the council. And it was a no, we're not going to do that because we know what the council are going to do in this with this information. Or it was also a safety thing that they didn't feel that it was safe for them to speak out about something like that. Approach hasn't been you must do this or you mustn't, you know, it was never do this, do that. It was we're here, we're going to listen. A year on, these same women are doing leadership courses and they're also actively involved in some of the work that we're doing. So again, if it does help anyone, it is just doing that casual listening initially and holding that relationship throughout the whole time. You're doing your job and just reaching out to them and the people to know that you're there, which is why community organizing has really worked for us. And it's shown that it's not about a specific service. When we've carried out engagement, it's been business engagement, it's engagement with young people. So it's not one specific issue with one specific person, it's groups, and it all develops from that listening. What is it that you've said, and what could we do with this information together? And how can you access the service that you would like to access? So we don't really do the job for them. We're there as an enabling person that's just always available to listen to them. So yeah, I would definitely, I'm sure that other community organisers will emphasise the element of listening, active listening and understanding the environment that you're working on. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Dewara, that was brilliant. I suppose the question I'm left with, which is probably not for you to answer, is how we as the council are going to sustain that going forward. So, you know, how is it spreading into all parts of the council? I know this today is one way of doing that. So maybe just leave that question.
Yeah, I think, oh, go on, Paul.
After you as well.
I was just going to say, obviously, there are lots of colleagues doing excellent engagement across LBR, and if there's any kind of shared learning that we can share, but I think it is always keeping top of mind the fact that we are just one behemoth organisation from the point of view of the resident, and that you know, that bit we were saying about taking people on a story with you, context, relationship building, without this, you know, making sure they're meaningful engagement opportunities as well. I think if you can follow those kind of principles that kind of explained in the video and the presentation, then that's certainly a good place to start with, having that consistent approach across. Over to you, Paul.
Just to build on that with a couple of reflections. I mean, firstly, very practically, you know, at Redbridge, obviously we have the engagement network, and that's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, in its kind of early stages, but yeah, but Ash and that team, that area, have done a brilliant job of sort of putting engagement on the map, and just starting by helping us as an organisation to develop a common understanding of even what engagement is. I think one of the sort of fundamental questions for the organisation to sort of answer, and be interesting for people to think about this in relation to their own area, you know, whether that's regeneration and culture, whether it's children's services, whatever it is kind of what's the purpose of engagement? Because I think a lot of the time we start, you know, having already assumed certain things about what we want our engagement to achieve. And what I think is interesting about the approach that we've taken in the Hubs programme, and I've just kind of posted a link about community organising, which I think is a sort of a, if you've not heard it before, it's a slightly funny phrase, but it comes from this idea that actually, if you kind of connect people with each other, it enables them to kind of take action to improve their lives, to improve their areas. And inherent within that, to be really candid, is kind of a bit of a critique of our current kind of political system, not attached to any one party or any one individual, but there's an assumption that we run an election, and that election kind of gives us a democratic mandate. But when you really look, I think, at the corporate plan or whatever document it is that we say we're delivering for residents, the number of residents actually involved in the development of those plans is minimal. So I think for us, the whole sort of community organising approach, the developing a community vision, the empowering residents, kind of it really seeks to challenge the more top-down approach to engagement, where you're saying, look, we have an agenda or we have a statutory duty, all of which are entirely reasonable, and our engagement function is basically to help us deliver that more effectively and efficiently, rather than asking a more sort of fundamental bottom-up question, which is, how can we best serve residents? How can we be the kind of best form of local authority? What does it mean to do that actually when we don't start with the top-down stuff, but we start with conversations and relationships in communities? So I think that's the other challenge is, we've got the engagement network, and I would support those efforts completely. But, at a more fundamental level, we need to be asking, what's the purpose of engagement, and how can we sort of flip those accountabilities so really we're more answerable to residents?
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Pete? Peter?
Oh, sorry. My internet's been a bit dodgy, so hopefully just say if I'm not coming through. I think as well as everything that you were just saying, Paul and Isabel, like we know we've done a lot of engagement as part of this program, a really unusual amount probably for local authorities and or almost any organisation, and it's been fantastic. And I think we should also keep holding the outputs of that, keep sharing them, and keep obviously demonstrating that within the organisation and more widely to encourage other people to do the same. But also, residents really appreciate seeing what we've done, understanding that we've been really actively listening, and that it has fed into concrete outputs. And I think, for the next few years, at least, we should be, I think, we're not resting on our laurels, obviously, but just keeping on communicating it, keeping on being proud of it, keeping on saying, Redbridge is really good at this. And I think you'll see residents forming a more positive opinion of the council. We see it every day, but you'll see that continuing to have repercussions over time. And then hopefully that will feed into further integrating the good engagement practices that we are already modelling here, and that we're talking about externally as well into all areas of our work.
Okay. Thank you, Pete. Any more questions, thoughts, observations? Yeah, go for it, Shazia.
Just to support Pete's point, actually, it's around kind of closing that feedback loop. I think it's really important. So while we're talking about sort of fostering those relationships, is that we're continually demonstrating what we've done as a result of the engagement, because it can, from a resident's point of view, can feel often as if these things sort of disappear into the ether once they've been said. So actually just continuously demonstrating that actually your engagement is changing things, and this is what it's changed and how it's changed things, so that you are building people's trust and you're kind of encouraging more engagement. I think kind of it's really, as I think Jawara was talking about, we are, and Isabel, we are all one organisation from their point of view. So kind of how we might think about kind of the teams or the directorates, they don't care and they shouldn't care. And so, when they've said something to one engagement person from the council, they expect that information and that insight to be shared. So it's I think there is we really need to think institutionally, like how can we smooth that? How can we kind of ensure the insight we're getting from in one directorate or from one engagement individual is being shared across the council, and that we can all act on that and that we can all use that insight. You know, there's still kind of obviously I'm a big fan and advocate of what we've done in the community hubs team, but there's still more to be done around engagement and making sure that insight is shared and continues to be shared and is heard by others is really, really important in such a large organisation.
Absolutely, thank you, Shazia. And that actually, in going back to your question, Mark, that was the thing that came into my mind, was that the kind of two groups of residents that are sometimes hardest to engage with are the ones who, as Dewara was speaking about, very isolated from in any interaction with council services. But the other group that's really hard to engage with are residents and partners who have had a lot of engagement with the council and have found that to be lacking and disappointing. So and you know, rebuilding that trust takes a huge amount of time and energy, and is absolutely worthwhile in doing so. But yeah, empowering people to be active in their own communities, you know, in order to do that, you've got to come from a place of trust, and feedback loops. And you said we did, demonstrating the power of their voice is absolutely an important part of that idea, and making sure there are opportunities for two-way dialogue, not just kind of comms opportunities that are going one way, but really inviting people in and inviting scrutiny, I think. I saw a hand go up and it's disappeared, so I just wonder.
It was me, Isabel. Hi. Yeah, I suppose I just wanted to reiterate that from a point of view of digital, we're doing this sort of work. We're doing user research. We do feedback. We had the adult social care site that went live back in March. It's completely built around our users, and we do feedback, and it's important to sort of do that. But I suppose it's just to sort of stress that there are other pockets of the organisation that are doing this work too. And yeah, it is really important to do that feedback, but at the same time, also sort of that engagement around what is possible and what isn't, because I think it's about managing expectations, and we've sort of found that quite a lot with the digital is about, you know, what is the want and what is the actual need, and sort of thinking about budget. So I think it's just important to sort of mention, you know, it's great to do engagement, and obviously for us as a team, user engagement is essential to design things around our customers, but it's about that sort of need and want, and those sort of questions that need to be asked.
Definitely, thanks, Corinne. That's really good to hear that that's been kind of co-produced, and yeah, and one would imagine that the outcomes will be far more successful as a result of it. But yeah, that's brilliant to hear. Thank you. Yes, Pete.
Yeah, just a response to Corinne, and wanting to know a bit more actually. What you see, Corinne, as the kind of the differences and maybe the pros and cons of the community organising approach that's been described today, you know, where you're asking kind of open questions, general engagement in that way, versus the kind of user design engagement that you're talking about, or where I guess they can be complementary. I think just tying back as well to what Isabel was saying about so many parts of the council doing engagement all the time, and sometimes it's really hard to engage people again, you know, for the same, you know, for different questions.
Yeah, it's different types of engagement though, isn't it, for different types of need, but I think it's about making sure you're going to the right groups. And obviously whenever we do our user research, we always talk about the community hubs and how that will be part of our front door model. Obviously we worked with Paul on this for some time, so it's just trying to make sure that you're just not making it look like it's just about a digital need, but also how will people access things in another environment. So I think with those sort of community sort of research and also around our engagement, we just try to make sure that we're sort of saying that there's actively things going on with the rest of the council. What we're looking at might be a specific need, but obviously if people and user groups that we've approached might want to get involved more widely, there's those opportunities. I think it's just making sure we've got that consistent messages going across the organisation. Otherwise, we probably batter people coming to them all the time, don't we? For the same sort of, well, they see it as the same sort of things, but it's not. And I think it's just being really important about, you know, what's the need, what's the want.
Absolutely. Thank you, Corinne. Yes, Nita.
Hi, I was just thinking about Mark's question in terms of how do we, as a council going forward, sort of have these sustainable relationships. And I think from the residents' perspective, if we add value as a council, then they're going to want to be in touch with us. So with every interaction and every listening, if there's some support from another team, our team has made sure that we connect. We also go back to residents, going back to what you were Corinne, what you were saying about your user groups and having that feedback. But you know, you might not have a solution or having an idea in the first conversation, but it's making a note of those ideas and thinking, oh, actually, so and so, if I connect them with so and so 3 months on, that could work, and that in the residents' minds adds value. So I think signpost has been a really important part of what we do, and also going to in terms of inclusivity, making sure everyone is involved and so that information is accessible. We go over and beyond in terms of going through our trusted stakeholders. So there's two pieces, isn't there? There's the listening with residents, but the listening with stakeholders. So our stakeholders are not just working with us because we're the council, they want to. We're adding value with them as well, so that they're the trusted gatekeepers to lots of communities. We see this with schools, and so as well as other organisations. And so having those trusted relationships with stakeholders, and then them knowing that you're trying your best to be inclusive and for everyone to be part of what we're doing, I think builds that trust. And as a council, I think, in fact, any organisation should be working towards that consistently, because it's quite easy for people to feel left out, whether that be they didn't get an email, there's no Wi-Fi in their area, their organisation or the demographic is not represented. It is more work and it is deeper work, but it's certainly worthy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nita. Aaron, you had your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I think what this presentation has demonstrated is, like, although community hubs is like a really interesting sort of like project to get involved in from a sort of resident perspective, if there's something which is a little bit less glamorous from a council perspective, then we can make it creative and engaging and sort of utilize the methods that we've seen here, even if it's something as boring as like a new sort of, I don't know, anything which isn't just as glamorous as that. And like, I think this will provide like sort of the sort of framework to sort of build upon this in the future, no matter sort of how sort of dull a project might seem from our side. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I always think there's just to respond to that, Aaron, I'm a big advocate for creative engagement and making it interesting. You know, it's called engaging, but sometimes it's not very engaging. So that's definitely a really important part of it, making it creative, making it fun, making it work for people, meeting them in their homes, in the different places and spaces that you can, making it work for people. So definitely hear you on that. But the other thing I would say, though, is having spent a lot of time out and about and people approaching you, and when they find out you're from the council, that there is no issue too big or too small or too boring often, from you know, because we're all people and we want our bins to be collected. We all have different priorities to the area, don't we? So it's amazing how I'm always in awe of the power of community and the people who you know, go give their hard won free time to invest in their community, and they want change, you know, whether it's a roundabout, whether it's bins, whether it's litter picking, whatever it is, people really go out of their way for the things that matter to them. And I think that's such a source of sort of untapped power for us, to enable people to create that change that's, you know, at no cost to us, other than showing, you know, connecting the right people to the right places and the right activities, and allowing them to do the fantastic work that they do. So yes, definitely a great point about making things engaging and fun that feel less exciting, but often you will find that people are engaged in the smallest and most unique of topics. So definitely Thanks for that, Aaron. I can't see any more. Yeah, go on, Aaron.
I was gonna say, like, I guess also the more creative. Sorry if you hear any light in the background. I've got a window open, but I guess it's also sort of what comes as a result of making it sort of like an interesting dynamic sort of engagement processes. You don't just have Richard Smith from South Woodford, retired solicitor, who's coming to the sort of to the event. You're having a more diverse sort of part of people who sort of represent the borough more widely. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And if I just go back to Mark's question, share one of my favourite moments for community engagement. I think my first week on the job, we were having a Gantt Hill workshop working with young people, and there was a whole team of young, probably 11 to 14-year-old boys who'd just come off the football pitch, who'd just come for the free food. And, you know, that was time for me to roll up my sleeves and engage them on some community hubs work. But, you know, when you take that time and you really listen to what they have to say, they came out with some brilliant insights. And so it's definitely worth making it engaging. Any more for any more? I can't see any more hands up. Oh, Nita, you were first, and then we'll go to Paul.
Hi. Yeah, I was having a bit of a brain freeze with the thunder, and I sort of was thinking, what was I going? My last point, in terms of like thinking about stakeholders and how we engage with them, where we in the Belonging Project, we engaged with 9 stakeholders, and through those stakeholders, it was the residents who were connected with those stakeholders that created the art for the Belonging Project. So we were able to hold an art showcase. It was created by the residents, and it was all about visioning and how they see their area. So being able to, I think I'm just reiterating my point around that, the importance of that stakeholder management and that trusting relationship that needs to be built with stakeholders, because once you've got that, you know, residents, they trust those stakeholders already, so it just comes with that. So I think it's working with those two together that really can make like great projects and get the community involved in a way where they begin to see us not as the council, more as the council.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nita. We want the council for sure. Paul, over to you. I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave to join Shaping Our Futures. So I'll leave Dilwara to wrap things up.
Thanks. Thanks, Isabel. I suppose just a couple of sort of reflections on what's been said. It feels like, firstly, just picking up on Corinne's point, lots of different types of engagement for lots of different purposes. And of course, a lot of the time, it's absolutely right and absolutely natural that the engagement that we do is more top down. That doesn't make it a bad thing. It still needs to be done. And where we do it, it should be high quality and we should be learning from it. And clearly, even if we're saying we want to co-design a new digital front door, or we want to co-design a new community hub, doing that well is much, much better than doing it badly. So that kind of feels, you know, absolutely right. I suppose my second point, though, is, and it's going to sound a little bit trite, but I do believe it. You know, Redbridge has a population of 300,000 people, and we tend to think of those people as sometimes residents, and obviously we kind of adopted the language of customers for I think good reasons, which are about helping to think about how we're accountable to those people. But I think what it slightly kind of misses, or what slightly runs the risk of doing, is thinking less about what's the kind of capacity or volunteering time or expertise or ideas or goodwill that exists in this 300,000 people. You know, that's more than the size of a Cambridge, you know, so that's a lot of people. And for me, the kind of engagement that we also need to be doing, as well as the stuff that we have to be doing, is the stuff that tries to kind of unpack and tap into the potential. So some of the stuff Dilwara was talking about earlier, where you can foster leadership, where you find it in seemingly unlikely places, you actually end up improving outcomes for residents. You know, many of those women, through being empowered and being equipped, will end up improving the outcomes in their communities. And there are other examples from our team and from every team. At children's centres, I think another good example, where actually that initial engagement leads to improved health outcomes, and sometimes, you know, life and death outcomes. So I think we definitely just need to kind of remember that, you know, if someone said to you there's 300,000 people, you know, how can we get the best out of that potential? You'd think very differently about the role of engagement. You'd think much more about how do we become a platform for people's ideas? How do we become a connector and a convener? Not just how do we deliver the services that we've been mandated to deliver for the past few decades. And I think it's that balance between the top down and the bottom up that is a real opportunity.
Thank you very much, Paul. So if there's no other questions, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you continue this listening process throughout all your activities, and I guarantee you'll see a difference, especially when it's listening to residents. And I honestly do believe all engagement staff across LBR are doing an amazing job, and we've connected with so many of them, and it's been a great honour to work alongside so many of our fellow engagement staff in LBR. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your lunch. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining for what?
Can you chop people out?
No, sorry. He's just.
It's not the care leavers thing.
No.
Yeah.